Let's have an environment conversation. The United Nations Environment Program is stationed in Nairobi. We are going to have the 5th UN Environment Assembly taking place in Nairobi as UNEP celebrates 50 years. Before we introduce the guests who have joined us in the studio this morning, let us hear today's story, also known as proverb from Egypt.
Yes. If you are mighty and powerful, then gain respect through your gentleness of speech. It has 4 parts. Part 1. Part 2. Don't order things except when it's fitting. Full stop. Part number 2. Now we go to 3. The one who provokes others gets into trouble. A bit obvious, isn't it? Second last. Don't be haughty lest you be humbled. Lastly, but don't be mute lest you be chided. I haven't heard the end of this. It's a proverb from Egypt, and I'm reading it as it was presented. But these 2 people I work with are determined that they should call it something other than what it is. It's a proverb, not a poem, not a short story.
Songs of Pharaoh. That's what it is.
He could be included in Pharaoh's short stories and poems.
Yes.
You know, we are accustomed to believing that the word proverb is synonymous with brief and to the point.
And cryptic.
And cryptic, yes. And also sometimes it's symptomatic of where it is that the proverb comes from. We were saying you will not hear of a proverb that includes a giraffe coming from Greenland, for instance. Neither will you hear a story about an elephant or a proverb coming from Ireland. But giraffe, elephant, an African proverb, we consider to be normal. Yes.
Okay.
There are no pyramids in this particular proverb.
That's what I was about to ask. Or a big river.
The River Nile.
Yes. Our guests this morning, Martha Cheruto is the Deputy CEO at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. She joins us in the studio alongside Anne Nyatichi Omambia. She's the Chief Compliance Officer and Climate Change Coordinator at the National Environment Management Authority. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good to have you in the show with us. Asanteni sana for joining us. Those are the 2 hot seats. Choose how we shall be applying the heat, one after the other. But you are good ladies. We are celebrating UNEP at 50, part of the reason why you're here to have this conversation. So we'll make this very celebratory. Martha, welcome.
Thank you.
And Anne as well. We are talking about UNEP at 50, talking about the 5th UN Environment Assembly and very many other things. Let's start by understanding. So when we say UNEP at 50, what does that mean, Anne?
It's a golden jubilee for UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program. They have been in existence since 1972, and therefore it's 50 years this year. As a serving the global space, serving the environment space, guiding through leadership and through, in essence, being the environmental conscience of the world, letting us know where we are heading to, where we were, and the trajectories we could lead to if we don't follow the right path in terms of environmental conservation, and also benefits we could reap if we are involved in conservation.
So they've been here for the last 50 years.
50 years, celebrating 50 years.
And now what is this, the Environment Assembly?
The United Nations Environment Assembly is a conglomeration, if I could call it, a meeting of the member states which subscribe to the United Nations Environment Program. We are currently 193 member states, including Kenya. And as we know in our country, the moment the Constitution guides us that if you ratify a convention, it automatically becomes law. Fortunately, Kenya bidded and became the host of the United Nations Environment Program. And this particular assembly is a meeting of parties. We also have observers and other major groups that come, and we discuss topical issues and make resolutions to guide us in terms of environmental management.
Even as UNEP has been in existence for 50 years, what is the world commemorating? What is the world saying needs to be celebrated, needs to be remembered, needs to be worked on moving into the future?
We are celebrating environmental stewardship, if I could say that we have, in the 50 years, managed to make humans realize that we are in the environment, we're part of the environment, and without the environment, humans can actually destroy themselves. And therefore, by being an environmental conscience, or the one that ticks you to remember that you need to take care of the environment, we are celebrating the fact that we have made milestones in terms of significant milestones in environmental management, including pollution issues, including issues related to climate change, biodiversity conservation, which are very critical. As a country, we are blessed with the rich natural resources, and we have been witnesses of the wanton destruction which we ourselves have occasioned, and we have also been witnesses of the rise and implementation of various policies, measures, regulations to guide us in terms of taking care of our environment, including the citizen call and non-government organizations that have awakened the voice that we need to take care of the environment. So what are we celebrating? We are celebrating achievements made in terms of enlightening us to be able to be conscious of our environment and taking care of it. We are celebrating milestones in terms of making efforts in conservation.
You know, whenever one hears the word environment, at least, no, let me say, when I hear the word environment, what I think of is trees. One, vegetation. Then I think of pollution. Waste strewn all over the landscape. You're driving and all you're seeing. There are places where you see an ice one, you're not sure what it is, but it's plastic waste that has been strewn on the landscape, so it actually forms part of that particular landscape. So when we talk of the environment, we talk of the headquarters of this huge UN body nestled here in Kenya. How would we say we have benefited from this body being nestled in our country? Just three things.
Thank you. The presence, I'll start from the environment. Yes, I know many people, when they think of the environment, we think the immediate thought is trees, and trees are significant. They give us clean air, they conserve our environment, they protect our shorelines, and many other benefits that we know, including providing us quite a number of resources, including wood and non-wood resources, including the honey that we like. So therefore, the presence of UNEP here, it's the first and the only United Nations body that is vested within a developing country, and that is vested within Kenya. And by being here, it pulled the world to an environment hotspot. We could consider Kenya an environment hotspot where conservation of the environment is being taken seriously. And secondly, it was able to bring about the consciousness to be able to take care of various resources, and brought in what we could call environment conferencing. We have staff who have been recruited, who work within the UN space. We have also brought in the global environment to be able to be vested here, and many other benefits. Secondly, the presence of UNEP here spurred the growth of environmental education within Kenya. I'm a beneficiary of that particular aspects. We have students that have been able to go into the environment space to be able to take environmental studies from way back. And also we have centers within the universities. We have regional centers of collaboration. We have quite a number of tertiary institutions that teach environmental consciousness. And this has been spilled over from the fact that we have an environment body that champions environmental issues. As a country, we have collaborated with UNEP in matters environment. I think the most recent we are aware of is the issues got to do with plastics, which you mentioned. They have been collaborating with us in NEMA and other tertiary institutions in terms of plastics management, marine pollution, environmental education. They are working with the scouts, the youth, in creating an environmental consciousness in the space. So their presence here is both a benefit to the government of Kenya and also to the citizenry of Africa and to us individually.
You can't talk of benefits without threats.
There are many.
So just mention three. What would you say are the three main threats to the environment if you were to speak globally?
Environmental threats are often unprecedented and also continuously evolving. The key current ones that we're grappling with, that we are all aware of, is one, climate change, which is on the lips of many of us in the recent years. Secondly is biodiversity loss, and that is why particularly this year we are addressing issues got to do to nature-based solutions to be able to address environmental threats. And of course, the third one, which you mentioned, has got to do with pollution. Pollution and all its spheres, to the air, to the water, and to the land. And pollution includes chemicals management and pollution including plastics, which you have mentioned very well. Of course, we're making strides, but there's quite a number of challenges got to do to address with all that, because we are all the participants that both cause the threats and are the solutions to that.
We are the solutions ourselves.
Yes.
Let's bring in the private sector. Cheruto, you are the Deputy CEO of Kenya Private Sector Alliance. It's a business membership organization that has very, very members who are all considered in business, right? How many of those would you say are in the manufacturing sector? How many of your members represent the manufacturing sector?
Thanks, Eric. So indeed, CAPSA is the apex body of the private sector, and we bring together the entire private sector, and this involves, you're looking at the corporates, you look at the multinationals, and then we're looking at associations as well as SMEs. But then within the associations, we have both direct and indirect, because the associations are direct members, but then we also have their members who are indirect members of CAPSA. So one big association that is known, that captures or works around the manufacturing sector, is Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and it has over 1,000 members. So indirectly, those are our members, and beyond that, we have direct members, just not those who are under KEM, but also direct members of CAPSA. And not only that, we also have SMEs. So there is a bigger chunk within the country that are members of CAPSA, and we work with them on matters climate change, now that the matters environment coming. So yes, there is the representation, but as we all know, manufacturing in the country is not the biggest in terms of composition. We really want to develop manufacturing, and it also came in as under the Big Four agenda. So if we strive, then we believe as a country we will have many more manufacturing companies within the country, as well as now growing the membership of the private sector.
Are there specific programs that CAPSA has, especially just gearing towards SMEs and, creating awareness on climate change, creating awareness on their role in pollution and management of our waste?
Yes, there are. There's so many. One thing that we all appreciate is that when the world or the earth was created, man was created last. If we look at the creation story, it was because we're supposed to protect it. And then unfortunately, in between, as human beings, we decided to destroy it. And now nature has come back to fight us, just the same way Professor Madai said. So what we've done as the private sector is that we are becoming very proactive. We are termed as the polluters of the environment. We've been known as the people who discharge waste anyhowly. But then as an organization, we agreed that this year, actually starting last year, we have done severally, but last year was a focus point. We actually came up with a sustainability pillar. And the sustainability pillar looks at climate change. We're looking at green economy. We're looking at matters, environmental conservation, protection, the blue economy, looking at the oceans. So several programs came up. And one thing I want to highlight is that we developed a strategy, and this we do in collaboration with government because we are keen on public-private dialogue. So we developed a strategy focusing on, we call it on 4CK, that is the corporate commitment to climate change action. Now this strategy is the first, we can actually call it among the first in Africa and even in the world from private sector, developing a strategy on matters climate change. So it looks at who are the main contributors and what solutions are there. So you're finding a private sector that is proactive. So you'll find in it we have education. So we are creating awareness. Number two, we're also providing alternatives. Remember, when you're telling someone to stop something, then you need to give an alternative. So we're also speaking at alternatives. And one way that, just to pick on what you talked about in terms of pollution, When we look at plastic, yes, you've told people not to use plastic, but what's the alternative? Because we're also keen on job creation. So we're looking at training opportunities, job creation or innovations. So we're looking at that. We are looking at policy reviews because it is important to involve the private sector. There is the development part, but we also implement. So for us to be compliant, then we also have to train people and educate them on the policies and the expectations. The other thing that we're also keen on, and to just make sure that the private sector is keen on sustainability issues, is we've also brought in a reward mechanism. So there is the Sdg Awards, and that one captures both the big corporates as well as the SMEs inside it. So you can see it is not only for the big ones or the big corporates in quotes, but then it covers the entire private sector, and not only on manufacturing, because remember, as the apex body, we have several sectors. So you're looking at matters tourism, you're looking at those ones in the education industry, you're looking at those ones in say now, for example, I'm looking at energy, I look at agriculture. So you're looking at all the sectors. How do we ensure that private sector and what strategies are specific to these particular sectors, SME involved, and we've also gone out to develop an SME club. So SME club now is specific to the SMEs. How do you hold their hand? Mentorship opportunities, coaching opportunities, and where possible, we also look for financing for them and support them.
Would I assume that when you talk of SMEs, you are referring to members of our community who trade in the informal sector?
It's all combined.
It's all combined.
Yes.
So is it the membership in groupings or is it individual businesses?
It's on two angles.
Yes.
Because you see, we bring in both the associations. So there is the broader perspective, associations who have their own specific members. So you also work with the leadership of these associations and engage them particularly on policies and even the activities that you want. And then now there are corporates, the individual SMEs that we also hold their hand. So it is on both angles, both the direct through the associations and then also the direct who are members. So you're looking at both angles. How do we help? Because one, through associations, because they are sector specific, then you'll have targeted one particular sector. But when you're looking at individual SME, then the needs, again, you customize your services to this particular SME. We could both be SMEs, but my needs or my sector is very different from your needs as another SME. So I'll have to tailor my program to mine and tailor other programs to yours. So we do at both angles. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that even as the world comes to celebrate in Nairobi with the Congress and then just looking at UNEP at 50, it's unfortunate that Nairobi clearly has a solid waste problem. The garbage heaps that we see in different parts of the city, doesn't really matter where you're driving through, has been an issue not in 2022, probably for years on end. And it seems that it's something that you just cannot come to grips with or deal with from both your ends. How should this matter be dealt with? I mean, it doesn't matter where you look. It doesn't matter where you drive through in the city. You're going to be met with this problem. And the optics of it, interestingly enough, UNEP at 50 and then having this Congress, and then you're driving through the city and you see heaps of garbage, solid waste that cannot be taken care of. It doesn't look really good, first of all, but then also something environmentally that ought to be dealt with. How do we deal with it once and for all?
Thank you. I always say that the solution to waste management is a change of attitude as an individual, because we are all waste generators. So it starts from, that's why we are talking about the whole circular economy approach, in the sense that from the start, when a product is designed, the designer needs to think, this product of mine, how long can I keep it circulating within the environment for as long as possible? If it's a water bottle, for example, it should be reusable long enough, and when it reaches its end of life, it should be recyclable, or in the manner that it can be upcycled, in the sense that it can even make a better product than what it originally was. And when it comes to household use, we have gradually grown to be a consumer society, especially within the urban areas. We pick, use, dispose immediately. And therefore, the consciousness to be able to know that I can be able to manage my waste better. And this we see sometimes in some homes, both within the urban and rural areas, where we have very clear bins for separating of our waste, where the children are inculcated from birth that they actually see within the household that waste is as much as possible. We don't generate food waste at the household level. The products that we use in the house, the packaging, as much as possible, it can be reused. We reuse it, and if we can have refills. At these days, we see industries that are going to manufacturing of refills, where I can have the original container and still reuse it for as long as possible, and the product that carried the refill is actually recyclable. That actually helps in minimizing waste. Within the school setup, we have done a lot as an authority, that is the National Environment Management Authority, collaborating with the Kenya Institute of Education and other training institutes at the tertiary level to bring the change of attitude. Because with what you perceive, if you perceive a product that this is waste, you'll immediately dispose it. But the next recycler sees it as value, it's an input, and therefore they immediately grab it up. And that's why we're working with both the private sector and other entities to be able to create value in that way, in the product. Because there's one guy who actually said that the future belongs to those that think environmental solutions of the world, including waste especially. Because once you're able to realize that this is value, then you'll manage it better. And then the sorting bit, even at organizational level, once the waste is sorted, there's no point of an institution, let's say the Standard, sorting their waste, and then the truck that comes to pick it mixes it all up, because that creates a challenge for the recycler. It takes a lot of time for the private sector or the people involved to sort that waste. The moment it's sorted, then the trucks can pick it in a sorted manner, and then it makes it easier for the recycler to actually pick only plastics. And then the bit about design, there's certain products where color is added in the packaging, especially let me talk about plastics. And that particular color, that not necessarily, it's just for marketing purposes to see that the bottle is green, but does not change the intrinsic content or value or taste of what is contained within. But when it comes to recycling, the recyclers actually want that bottle, they prefer it in a clear color, because then when they're recycling it, they can make it to whatever color they want. But once the color is in it, then they're stuck with that original color, which was not necessarily important for the content. So those are some of the environmental consciousness. Now, to Nairobi, as a city, we have grown exponentially. And our waste challenges have been compounded by the fact that some of the urban areas where we've expanded to, there is no proper waste management services provided. And as long as the service is not provided, then when the people are not able to have a place to put their waste, then they will dump it.
Sure.
But there are other places where the service is actually provided, but the people have a wrong attitude in the sense that they believe it is somebody else's responsibility. We always say, we call it an environment, not in my backyard theory, in the sense that the moment I pick my waste, my house is clean, but I dump it the next door, it's not in my compound, so my compound is clean. And that's the attitude mindset we have to change, that we need to bring it, take it, it is my waste, my responsibility, this is my environment. If I don't dispose it well, to land back on my table.
Mr. Mombi, I'll challenge you a little bit on that, but let's take a break. Okay. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a situation. It's 8:30. We are live on SpiceFM, online, YouTube and Facebook, and also on KTN Home, having a conversation about the environment as UNEP celebrates 50th anniversary in Nairobi with the 5th UN Environment Assembly. Our guest this morning, Martha Cheruto, the Deputy CEO at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and Anne Nyatichi Omambia. She's a Chief Compliance Officer and Climate Change Coordinator at the National Environment Management Authority. Time for a quick break. We'll be back shortly. Good morning.
Spice.
So, Omambia, we're talking about, solid waste management, just off of the question that Ndu had asked. We are having the UNEP conference in Nairobi. We are dealing with the kind of solid waste mismanagement in Nairobi. And you very well said, everybody has a role to play. The polluters have a role to think about, those who are generating waste have a role to think about what they do with the waste. And this is everybody, you and I. Every day we are consuming, so we are producing waste. And we also have the duty bearers when it comes to now management of that solid waste. And this comes from either the urban authorities, the county governments and all, the municipal councils, thinking of how that waste shall then go into a place, how it shall be recycled, what needs to be recycled, what needs to be incinerated is dealt with, and all that. And then there's the organization that you come from, the National Environment Management Authority. Not agency, not committee, not task force. Authority established by law. What responsibilities do your organization and the county governments have on management of waste? Because when you say, yes, people, what was the terminology you used about waste and backyard?
Not in my backyard theory.
Not in my backyard theories. So therefore, I'm conscious of waste. I take care of waste in my space, and then I take it out. I expect somebody else has the responsibility, because we have collective responsibility. Somebody else has the responsibility to then move it from there. Now, those are the ones I have issues with. What powers do you have as NEMA to make sure that the county, for example, of Nairobi manages waste properly?
Thank you very much. We all have indeed a responsibility for management of waste, and the Constitution provides the right to a clean and healthy environment. It's actually within the Bill of Rights of the country. So we all have a right to a clean and healthy environment. But the second part of that sentence says that, and the responsibility to keep it so. It's to the citizens of Kenya, including the duty bearers. The National Environment Management Authority is established indeed by an Act of Parliament, the Environmental Management and Coordination Act. We are Environmental Act of 1999. And we have a mandate to coordinate and supervise all matters related to the environment. That's a very broad mandate. And also to advise government on matters environment through policy formulation and legislation. So specific to waste management, NEMA has a mandate to ensure that waste is properly managed within all the entities. Waste that is into the air, into the water, into the soil and the atmosphere. And therefore, in the three spheres of the environment, we have air quality regulations that manage pollution of the air. We have water quality regulations that manage pollution of the water. And we also have the solid waste management that deals with the solid refuse, including sewer. And what we do as an authority, we have the regulations that guide on how waste should be managed. And these regulations apply to all waste generators and all waste handlers, including the county governments. And for the water quality, we also have refuse management specific to sewer. With that regard, we also set guidelines, because you cannot only, once you put the regulation, you have to guide people how to do it. We give them the how to go about it. We also set standards of the nature in which you should be able to treat your waste before you release it into the environment. Indeed, the county governments have faced with significant challenges with waste management. One, I look at it in terms of the technology to handle the waste. That is the sewer reticulation. As we have said before, that Nairobi has exponentially grown in terms of both the population and the space it covers, and not all areas are sewer reticulated. So we end up using soak pits and other crafty alternatives which people use, including using the honeysuckers to sack and releasing it, not taking it to the sewer treatment site, but releasing it in whatever stream or valley where they come across, which is very, very unfortunate and wrong to the environment. And then thirdly, they're also responsible for collection of the waste. So we need the infrastructure, the waste skips or the containers to pick it from the neighborhood, take it to the treatment site. And when we get to the treatment site as we know it, Dandora, is full and has been full for very many years. It has served the city for many years, and there have been several plans previously by the city councils and now by the county governments to be able to manage that. But what I wish to say is that over 70% of waste generated in Kenya, and specifically Nairobi, is actually recyclable. And therefore doesn't need to go to Dandora. We have the organic waste, which is the largest composition, which is about 69-70% again, which can make very good compost manure to give us organic food. Then we have the plastics. We have the glass, which can do very good artwork once it's recycled. And we have paper, which can make us very many recyclable products from paper. And we also have, we had scrap metal, but there's now an embargo on a government ban on recycling of scrap metal. Because of the irregularities which came about within that space. But With the 30% that remains, that is the little that should go there. But unfortunately, because we don't sort our waste, we all dump it all together. It's all picked and dumped. And again, in terms of service provision, not areas are served, including, especially for waste collection. We have our low-income areas that are not served by that, and that waste ends up somewhere becoming an eyesore, not only becoming an environmental eyesore, it also brings about the resultant diseases that end up, again, all affecting us. So indeed, the councils have their challenges, but they have made significant steps. They are in various bilateral and their own domestic resources from the government coffers to better manage the waste.
Now, you
and
said
that Nairobi, I think, and other counties have improved over time.
You said in the law that establishes NEMA, you have a role to advise county governments. Does that extend to enforcement? Because you have the regulations and all.
Yes. We are an enforcing agency. As a regulatory agency, we are an enforcing agency. So as an authority, we also enforce. And that enforcement, especially specific to waste management, we set about the National Solid Waste Management Strategy, which guides, and actually for the county governments, we put in place 10 minimum points, which we give them to be able to put in place as a county. One, have service provision of collecting waste within your county zones. To designate a site for dumping of that waste. On that site, sort it, compact it, and put a fence around it, dig a trench around it. The trench is for purposes of collecting the leachate. As the waste decomposes, it releases some fluids, which we call leachate, which should not spill to the neighboring compound. And as much as possible, weigh the waste at entry. Dandora is the only waste site where waste is weighed, such that we're able to map our volumes. We need that data to be able to better manage, because when you're putting it measures of feasibility for relocation or for purposes of climate change, our greenhouse gas emissions, we can only know once that data, if we have how much volume do we generate, how can we better manage it, how much is recyclable and all that.
All right.
And with that, then the counties have had challenges in terms of, one, the resources, and also the right technology. Because if you visit a proper sanitary landfill, it's actually a recreational park in many parts of this world, where you can be able to go and they use the top of that landfill to do other things.
Are you saying that with the meager resources our counties have, that they cannot create something that serves our purpose? Must it be a state-of-the-art outfit, such as the ones we see in other developed countries?
It mustn't be a state-of-the-art if we are able to, as much as possible, keep that waste circulating within the environment. Because the 70% that we are disposing, which is actually recyclable, if you're able to avoid that, the 30 that is left, the resources will actually be enough to manage that. And even with the absence of that, the counties are able to, one, work with the citizens. And I think they have been working with residents associations that I am aware, including NEMA. We're working with residents associations to put up measures to manage their own waste. I think the case study that is often championed is the Nyayo Embakasi, as a resident association which has come up with very good waste management facilities. So at the resident level, working with the county governments will be able to better manage the waste. But for areas that are not well organized, or where the trucks, like I'll give you the example of low-income areas where the road network is not so good. The trucks that go to pick in the waste may not be able to pick it. And we also have business, private entities who have gone into waste collection. But unfortunately, some of them just use any random truck to collect waste. And what you do is that it becomes... They all do.
I'm yet to see anything that actually shouldn't be in a museum. I mean, those vehicles are some of the most tired and roadworthy vehicles you can actually come across.
Unfortunately so. But there's some companies that have actually invested in proper waste handling trucks. And those guidelines and minimum points, the ones I mentioned, we have actually put them within the law, that your truck should be, as much as possible, comply to, one, it should not be an eyesore on the road, it should not be a road hazard in terms of littering. Some of them, you follow, they're carrying, the fluids are flowing out.
Mambia, I agree, the efforts are commendable. I'm not going to doubt that.
Yes. But they're not complying.
No, not even that. Now, Eric, that was Eric's favorite. Now I'm coming to my favorite.
Okay.
Do you have any collaboration with the Kenya Institute of Development or Curriculum Development Do you work with schools to inculcate these things in our children as they grow up? Because you began by saying state of mind, attitude. So where do you inculcate these wonderful understandings of the environment, unless you start from the time?
Exactly.
Even as a private sector.
Yes, we're coming to you.
Okay. I must say that the National Environment Management Authority has collaborated with the Ministry of Education, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, the higher education institutes, including the Kenya School of Government that trains government officers on matters environmental management, including
the outcome of Mambia of all these collaborations.
The outcomes are quite. I can map for you the positives and the negatives. Yes. I just want to say that we work with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development before CBC and after CBC in the current dispensation. I am sure that because the competence-based curriculum is currently on our lips, you are aware that the students, the learners are taught environmental studies from inception. And that is already within the system. In the previous system, the same was applied, that we have calculated environmental studies, including waste management. And when it comes to the public participation, we work with the environmental education centers to celebrate World Environment Days. We have themes, for example, for drama that are based on environment, and schools are awarded. We award them on which school has best interpreted the theme on environment, including waste, on climate change, and all these issues, including biodiversity. We also work with universities where we have Green Universities Network and regional centers of collaboration. Those are institutes that train specific issues on environmental management. For a fact, I can say from inception, I think I'm in the third lot of environmental students in Kenya at Kenyatta University. When environmental education specifically began being taught at the tertiary level, it has gradually grown, and very many universities in Kenya now train environmental education.
Sure.
For the private sector, we work with community-based organizations and faith-based organizations and non-government organizations, including KEPSA in the private sector, on environmental education, awareness, training, and we must say that the collaborations have grown over time.
Okay. Charity, I've got to ask you this. I mean, I think when we talk about recycling, and because it seems to me at the crux of the matter here, and there was a time when recycling became a global mantra, and I think there were songs that were sung about it. But then it is a bit worrisome to hear that of all the solid waste that is collected, 70% of it is recyclable. I believe there was a campaign within the city some time ago when there were bins that were separated into, but then it just turned out to be one whole mishmash of garbage, and nobody really bothered about where they threw plastic or paper. What initiatives are being set up? I mean, we've had conversations about sustainable business, for example, which is one of the things that KEPSA pushes. But what is being done to make sure that the recycling nature becomes second nature here?
Okay, thanks. So I want to use an ideal industry, and look at the whole chain as we discuss the recycling. Because, yes, initially we all thought linear. You produce, and at the end, it's a waste. But then with the circular economy or the circular model, then you're looking at it ending the loop, that whatever you have becomes a resource on one end, and it can produce either a new product, or you can now use the 3 R's. Either you will reuse the waste that you have, what you've actually put it, you can recycle, and also you can repair. So those are the 3 R's that we're looking at. Now, within an industry, how do we promote and ensure that all this is incorporated? Let's look at an ideal industry. You have inputs and outputs. One, you look at the raw materials. That's where the environment comes in. So you get your raw materials. How do you transport to the industry? And that's where now, when you look at pollution, you're looking at, say, vehicle emissions. What is happening currently is we are very keen on either you load properly, you don't just put half, because you need it to be fully loaded so that you can reduce the fuel consumption. Number 2, on matters transport, the industry is also moving towards e-mobility. So that's a way of managing pollution from the transport perspective. Now you've come to the industry. So from the industry, let's look at the manufacturing process, the machines that you're using. So she's spoken about there's water pollution, there's air pollution, there's so many types of pollution that are there. So the machines that you're using, how efficient are they? So you incorporate energy efficiency. If it is using water, then you make sure that water efficiency is within it. within that process and the machines that you're using. The third thing, if it is a new industry, then you incorporate it from the design. So you see, the design, you have to ensure either if it is a building or a factory setup, you're looking at how do you incorporate, say, green building principles within your design. So you're starting again from the design. So there's the design side, and then there's the retrofitting. So if it is an existing factory, it's about retrofitting. If it is a new factory or a new building, then you look at from the design perspective. So those are the machines that you're using. Then look at the process itself. One, the people handling. So there is the labor, and brings in the education perspectives, bring in the labor and participation and changing mindsets. The people who are handling this process, are they aware of what they're doing? Do they know the best practices on environmental issues, on climate change issues, on sustainability? How equipped are they? The engineers present, people also within finance. When they're procuring, do they understand how to incorporate climate change strategies? People within marketing, when they're selling, and even brand now, brand visibility has come up within this within the world, because now that's how we can call it the gist. How sustainable is your brand within the market? When you're looking at even the flowers going out and the market outside, how do you present your product to the market? So you're talking about the emissions, the things that you've used. If it is in agriculture, whether you're discussing smart agriculture. So that is how an industry can come in. Then let's look at also within this processing, there are investments. Are you investing in the low carbon technologies as an industry or as an organization? So you've looked at the people, you've looked at the items that you've bought, you're looking at the technologies. Then let's move now to the end product. The product has gone to the market because you're looking at competitiveness. So the advantage that we're pushing for is how sustainable, how competitive is your product in the market? Because all a consumer needs is looking at the pricing of the product at the end of the day. I don't need to know how much you've used on this other end. And so there is now the policy perspective that will affect the competitiveness. So you're looking at what policies are there within a country to manage sustainability.
These policies, are the laws adequate to pursue this beautiful agenda that you're outlining?
As at now, the laws are adequate. I would bring in the context of now compliance, and where we're pushing for as private sector is cooperative compliance. Can we work together? Don't always think about a stick every single day, because the environment is there every single day. We will dirtify it today. But then when there's a fine of 1 million every single time, then I will be dishing out money, but then I will not be sorting out the problem. But then what we are saying is, can we be having a discussion, both of us, both government and private sector? This is a problem that affects us, not only as an organization, but even as an individual. How do we manage this process? So we go through that process together. That's why we developed together, and we're appreciative of the collaboration we have with even NEMA. We work with the agencies within Ministry of Environment and the entire government, in the context that we look at policies, review them, and give proposals and recommendations together with the impact, so that you just we are not developing things for the sake of it, but what is the regulatory impact of that policy or that regulation that you have.
But despite all this, are there still challenges that you still face and you feel you need to surmount?
Yes, challenges are there, because you see, one thing that also COVID has showed us is we're in a global space. And every day there's something that comes up. So it's about dynamism. So how do we ensure that these policies and the regulations can accommodate the dynamism of the situation or the environment that we're in? Number two, how do we sustain? Because now when I was looking at the industry, the ideal industry or hypothetical industry, so we are at the end of competitiveness and the market space. So as an contributor or a producer, I have done my part all the way from the start to the end. Now I'm in the market, the consumer part. So once I sell my product, the new regulations which are coming in, which we expect to be gazetted hopefully very soon, the extended producer responsibility, it will give me my responsibilities. And I'm supposed to work and ensure that I can track my product to the end. So there is the producer here, but then there's the person who's buying. There's this consumer. So there is now that mindset of making sure that this consumer understands what this product will do, because we are all targeting net zero. We want to look at waste as value at the end of the day. So what role do I have? So I have bought, say, a beverage. The organization has ensured that the plastic has met the global standards. Remember, there are those standards that we have to work with. So we are complying to that end.
Right.
Then there's this responsible consumer who has to also pick it from there. So one thing that we want to do also is to provide those bins. So there's the provision of the bins where necessary. Then there is education, showing them that this is what you can do with this product. So there's the education sensitization. Then there's also working now with the agencies on this other side. So if the responsibility of the counties, the responsibility of the agencies within government, the community around it, and then move all the way. And fortunately, on this side, there are very many job creation opportunities. You can be a recycler. That's an opportunity.
Yeah.
You can take that waste and it becomes your raw material. That's an opportunity for you. You can look at it and look at alternatives. Let's look at plastics were banned, the paper bags.
There's a lot that can be done.
Exactly.
Cheruto, I
Yes.
had to cut you short, but running out of time. It's a lot that you're saying that needs to be done, that's happening in the community and in the society in terms of just managing our waste. I want to thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Martha Cheruto is the Deputy CEO at KEPSA, and Anne Omambia is the Chief Compliance Officer, Climate Change Coordinator at the National Environment Management Authority. Asanteni sana, ladies. As we celebrate UNEP at 50, let's all talk about our environment, what all of us need to do. All of us, we all have a responsibility. Then let's all play our responsibility in keeping our environment safe. Keep it here. This is Kenya's Biggest Conversation. Coming up, more conversations in the next hour. We have also been live on KTN Home.
Spice FM.